What is the most common error in LDS music? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on Dr. Doug's Daily Tips for Writing Great LDS Church Music. The most common error that I see in the writing of new primary songs, new hymn arrangements, new LDS church music of any kind has to do with motion. In other words, when the soprano is moving in a certain way, either up or down or staying the same, that the low part, the bass part, is moving in a way that does not work too well and often very poorly against the soprano. Okay, so we're going to talk about motion today. First of all, there are 4 types of motion in music. We have, let's make a little list here. 1, we have contrary motion, which is when the soprano is going one direction and the bass is going the opposite direction. Okay. Number 2, we have what's called oblique motion. If I can spell oblique. There we go. That's when one voice is moving and the other voice is staying steady. Those 2 types of motion are very good and your safest bet. The 3rd type of motion is what we call similar motion. Similar motion can be very good. In other words, if both the soprano and bass are moving upwards, that's a type of similar motion. The correct kind of similar motion is when, well, there's 2. You know, the upper voice might be like leaping in thirds upwards while the bass is stepping upwards. They're moving in similar motion, but they're not moving exactly the same in similar motion. Their motions are a little bit different, but it's the same direction. That's good. The one that can be dangerous is this other type of similar motion, which is more specific, and we call it parallel motion. But there's a good kind of parallel motion, and there's a bad kind of parallel motion. The good kind of parallel motion is when your soprano and your bass are moving in thirds or in sixths. That's okay. But a poor type of writing is when the soprano and the bass are moving in the same direction, up or down, in fifths or in octaves. That's a biggie that we want to look out for. Now, not in every instance, but in most instances, that's what we want to look out for. The instances where those kind of parallel fifths and octaves work is if you're writing in a style like Debussy, the French composer Debussy, or some similar kind of formula like Debussy uses, because he uses the techniques of parallel motion inside the context of well-written music. However, typically in hymns and in primary songs, we don't usually get that kind of writing. In hymn arrangements, it's a little more possible because it's a little bit freer, the formula that we use for an arrangement. So in hymn 107, the hymn we're looking at today, Lord, Accept Our True Devotion, there are examples of 2 of these types of motion that are really good. You can always count on them. Okay? The first is contrary motion. The second is oblique motion. So here on the score, I've marked in red some examples of contrary motion. Let's look at the first one. Right here, you can see how the bass is going up from low G to C. Now compare the direction of the bass to the soprano. Well, it's coming down. Perfect example of contrary motion. Very smooth, very good. What I sometimes see is when a melody is making this kind of motion, I'll often see the bass part making the same motion and in fifths or in octaves. And that's parallel. That's like illegal parallels in traditional harmony that we want to usually avoid. Again, unless you're writing in the sort of the Debussy style or some other kind of similar style. Okay, another example of contrary motion, slightly different. The soprano is coming down, and the bass, starting on this low B, up to C, up to F, and all the way up to G, is making its way up. The thing that's so great about contrary motion is it covers almost any potential problem for poor writing. There's all sorts of rules about writing SATB 4-part music, and contrary motion between the soprano and the bass almost gets you out of Dodge 100%. I can't say 100%, but most of the time. Okay. The other type of motion we have here is oblique motion, which I've marked in blue. So here in the very opening 2 measures, take a look at the bass. The bass is not moving. It's steady on one pitch level, while at the same time, the upper voice is moving. That's what we call oblique motion. Okay, one voice stays the same, the other voices move. It could be the top voice that stays the same, and the bottom voice moves. Both are oblique motion. Why is this such a good, safe type of motion? Because like contrary motion, oblique motion pretty much has zero possibility of you causing any illegal 4-part writing errors. Most of the time. Okay, so that's a very good, strong, safe kind of motion, all right, to help you avoid these most common errors that I see in my own students and in even in some published music, even in some very popular newer primary songs that have lots of plays and follows on social media and so on. And not that they're poorly written songs, they're lovely songs, but they could be better if they used some of this stronger types of motion. Anyway, we're not here to pick on people. We're here to give you some tips. So this is your composer gem for the day from hymn 107, to use contrary and oblique motion as much as you can, and to depend on them. They'll get you out of trouble. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like some more free tips, head over to latterdaymusiversity.com, where you can get my 24-page free report called The 10 Commandments of Composing Testimony Feels Music. Give you lots of other additional ideas for some fundamental, foundational ways of writing very strong LDS church music. Come back tomorrow, and we'll look at hymn 108. See you then.